So you want to make paper lyrics like this for your content? I'm going to show you exactly how to create your own lyrics from start to finish. We'll break down how to create a fake scan sheet of lyrics in Photoshop, then use Premiere to cut up and animate the scan so it's a ready to go asset. And finally, I'll run you through a quick demonstration of how I actually use these assets on day to day and give you some tips and tricks how to even make it look even better. If you don't have the Adobe suite, you should be able to follow along in your own editing software. Everything here is fairly basic knowledge, but if you get stuck, just look up alternatives for the names of tools I mentioned. If you don't know me, my name is Alex. I'm the founder here at Dumb Days. You might have seen our Blender or mixed media tutorial before, but you're watching this on our second channel right now, where we normally post our podcasts or other behind the scenes series. This page is where all our feature tutorials and masterclasses will live. We have a lot of cool ideas and different educational series that will be coming out soon. If you like what we do, check out our main channel where we post music videos and a lot of other original content in the Dumb Days universe. As I say with all tutorials, I would have considered this workflow to be the best one possible. This is the workflow that I found works best for what I'm trying to do. My goal here is to show you the process so you can take it, adapt it to your own workflow, and create something epic. I'll explain everything I can do along the way, but some basic editing knowledge is required. This video is especially helpful if you already own one of the asset packs and you're just trying to create some more words for lyrics you're missing, or just switch up the style. Over the years, I've printed out thousands of mixed media frames and used to physically print out lyrics on paper to get this effect. It looks sick, but also wasted a ton of paper, and half the time it didn't even come out right. Sometimes though, it almost looked too clean. And while that can still be cool, I want something more raw that really felt like these were grungy pieces of paper that were laying on top of the video. A few months ago when I was on the road without a printer or any of my tools, I experimented a lot with trying to find a way to recreate this effect digitally. Physically printing them still is a certain kind of magic. There's tons of natural imperfections you get from a real printer, which is part of the reason why I still physically do my animations when possible. But this digital method saves so much time and resources, and honestly, the difference is minimal. Pair it with our real mixed media scans, and you get a look that feels raw, grungy, and in some ways even more realistic, which is ironic. Making these aren't hard, but it is time consuming. Over the course of a few months, I made over 500 of my own custom assets using their process, full of the most commonly used lyrics. I just released that collection as a pack for $7.99 USD, but I know that could still be a lot of money for some people. So I created a free pack of over 100 assets that you can start you off. I want to create this video as a guide to show how I made those lyrics, so you can either make 400 more of those lyrics if you can't afford the $7.99, or just add in some words you might have missed out on. You can also use this tutorial to completely switch up the style and make something completely different just using the basic bones of what I'm about to show you. If you have the paid pack though, there already are some template projects for both Photoshop and Premiere for you to utilize. Alright, so I got Adobe Photoshop open here. What we're trying to do here is create a sort of fake scanned piece of paper. So something that looks like we had just printed out or typed the lyrics out, printed it out, and scanned it back in. Now we have a piece of paper that's ready to be cut up and, take the lyrics from. And like I said, if you have the paid asset pack, then you already have a project file like this exact one ready to go. So if you have that project file, you kind of skip ahead a bit, but I'd recommend you still watch this entire process to kind of understand why I built things the way I did, so you can take the things to your own, so you can adapt things to your own liking. Like I said, this part of the process is where you could really play with how things look and make it different. You can play with different textures, noise, colors, fonts, all sorts of different things like that. So that's why I recommend you watch this part so you understand what that is, so you can go ahead and make those tweaks to make your own different looking stuff. But before we get ourselves, let's just start from the beginning so you can get a clean slate. So you're following along without the asset pack, you can make this yourself. So let's make a new file. The sizing doesn't really matter, but for the sake of remaining consistent and just for general vibes, I like to make it the size of an actual piece of paper that we print out. So that's letter paper. You can find that under your print section of your new documents, or just make a document with these details. So 8.5 by 11 inches. Make sure your DPI is set to at least 300. And let's set the background to be white, like a real piece of paper. So now we have this empty canvas, and this looks like a blank piece of paper, right? And if we were to scan this piece of paper, if we were to print it out, we would get a little bit of noise, but it would look pretty basic and it would look pretty clean, depending on, of course, the size of the paper and the type of it and all that kind of stuff. But what we want ultimately have is a paper like this. We see where it's really texturized and looks like this looks extreme. This isn't what a real scan piece of paper would look like, unless it was heavily altered. But for the sake of what we're trying to create, it really sells the grainy noise effect that looks like these piece of papers, these lyrics were cut up from real piece of paper. So to get there though, it's pretty simple. First, we're going to throw in some real scans that I made from a previous asset pack, which is, I believe, still available in our store. It's a holiday pack, but if you have the free asset pack from today, it is still included in that. It's just a bunch of real scans that I made let me drag one in, of piece of paper from a long time ago that have both, you know, the noise and the texture of the paper, but also some cool little crayon dust assets, like, you know, like you can see here, like real crayon smudges add a little bit of texture. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag one of those in. There'll be a few in the path. You can kind of pick and choose whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. But let's drag it in. Let's scale it up. Make sure you're not scaling it unlocked like this. You want to scale it just evenly. And I'm just scaling it like normal, just dragging it, not holding under buttons, so it fits the screen. So we're going to place one. And we're going to place another one, which can be the same one. It doesn't have to be a different asset. We're just going to drag it, make it bigger, put it in a different spot. Maybe a little bit smaller. I wouldn't go too big with the size because you don't want to make that noise too wide, but that's looking good right there. Okay, so now that we have both these textures laid in here, now we're going to play with the blending mode of these textures so they kind of apply to our base white background and make it look like this is on the actual paper, right? Obviously, we don't want it black like this, which you could do lyrics like this too if you wanted to, but that's not how we're doing it. So first, we're going to go to our bottom layer of these textures, and we're going to go here to our blending mode, and we're going to change it to overlay. And then we're going to go to the top one, and we're going to go to subtract, which is right here. So now you can see pretty much instantly we have this texture now laid out on the actual piece of paper on that white background, and now we have all this extra texture. And it is different from this one lightly with just, you know, the crayon markings, but we're going to touch some things up in a second. But hopefully you can see now how this adds so much texture to what we're trying to achieve here. And you can play around with different blending modes if you want, you know, really go to your liking, but this is what I found works best. I don't think the overlay, the bottom one, actually does much, honestly. However, I like to think that adds a little more fine detail here and there, so I just keep it there. It doesn't really hurt, but it's there. Now, I think maybe we should, let's just add in some adjustments. So let's go to our adjustment layer. Let's add some brightness and contrast. So just push the brightness up a little bit, the contrast a bit, just so everything pops a little bit more. All right, it looks a little more fresh white, like that. And you can see we're getting much closer to our reference. You can even push the saturation a bit if you wanted to, just so you can have these dusts, you know, come across a little bit cleaner. And boom, you pretty much have it here. You have your kind of base, you know, quote unquote scan piece of paper ready for you to start adding lyrics to. So I would save this project file, make this be your base, and now let's add in some more stuff. So for the sake of it, I'm just going to hide all these in a folder just to make it easier. Let's name it textures. So now let's go ahead and add some text to this. So let's start making our lyrics. So let's add a new layer here at the bottom. Let's add a new layer, and let's go to our text tool, click anywhere, and here we have some text. We're just going to put test in there. And for the sake of matching our previous lyrics, I'm going to give you the exact settings for that. So let's make sure that our text is to Arial. Let's put the size to 23. Let's type it out actually. 23. And let's make sure the spacing between them is set to -40, which it already is. So this is just the spacing between the text like that. So that did not update. We got it. 23. 23. There we go. Okay, so cool. So we have that. And again, you can play with different fonts here. You can do some cool stuff here, but for the sake of what we're trying to do, this is what we have here. So what I would normally do is if I had some of this, I'd put multiple words in a row, different words. So I'd make, you know, test 2, test 3, test 4, right? Let's imagine these are all different words, right? So we're gonna add some space between them. Make the space whatever you want. You just want to have some depth between them. So now we have these, and what we're gonna actually do is we're gonna drag it to the top of it. You can really put it anywhere, but this is kind of where I like to place it. And we're gonna, clicking on it, we're gonna duplicate this layer 2 times. Let's duplicate it once though first, and then we're just gonna drag it down. It's good if it's even, so I'm holding down shift here. I'm just dragging it to make sure it's centered with it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but for our later step of the process, it will make it easier if it is. So just give some distance between it and duplicate it another time. and now let's create some more distance between it. So what we're doing here is we're creating essentially 3 variations of each word, right? Imagine that test 2, test 3, test 4, those are different words. We're creating different variations. We have 3 versions of test, right? 3 versions of test 2, 3 versions of test 3, right? So when we eventually animate them, we're going to cycle through these 3 words at 2 frames each, which creates, an effect as if the text has come to life, right? So you just want to make sure they're placed in different spots. It is nice sometimes if you can place them over some sort of crayon dusty up or something like that, just to make it feel a little bit different. But it's not essential. And again, the spacing, you can really play with it here. You can do all sorts of different stuff. And normally what I would do is I'd fill this entire page with words. So I would go through a lyric or a song that I know I'm going to do video for. First, check the asset pack, make sure I don't have those words, certain words. And if I'm missing certain words, I'll just write them in a line, multiple lines, and just fill this entire page, but still making sure that I leave enough room to have 3 copies of every single line, right? But anyway, so we have these 3 copies. So now we're going to go to shift select all these layers, or you could shift select them here, and we're just going to combine them. We're going to merge layers into one. So now we just have 1 layer. Oops. Actually, it helped also to lock these if you haven't already. Lock these textures. Wait, that's locked. I could just lock this whole thing. So now with our layer, our goal is to make this text look a little more realistic, like it was really printed on. And if you were to really print this, right, the text would bleed more into the paper, right? It would blend and have more noise. It feels layered. And even if your printer is slightly out of alignment, it might even do something where the text is like double, has a little bit of a shadow or something like that. That's where those imperfections really lay. But our goal here is to make this look more believable. It doesn't really look like it's really printed on there, right? So, like I said, a million different ways to achieve sort of an ink bleed or printed effect on text on Photoshop. There's plugins. There's a million tutorials from graphic designers out there that are much better than me to explain this. But using some of that, I kind of streamlined. It's a very, very basic approach, like a 2-3 step process to that I can just use and rinse and repeat all these to kind of match it all. It's not the most perfect. It's not the most realistic. However, it works for exactly what I'm trying to do. And like I said, the final result, I think to me looks good. So let's take this layer. Let's go to our filters up top. Oops. Let's go to distort. And then we're going to select ripple, right? Ripple's right here. You'll get a dollar that opens up. It opened up my other screen for some reason, but you'll see we have an amount here. So let's just go and let's do 101. It's barely adding anything, right? 101, hit OK. You can see pretty instantly it added this kind of extreme warpiness to the text. Kind of makes it look like it was printed or kind of messed up a bit. Again, a nice printer wouldn't mess it up this much, right? But we're going for that grungy kind of messed up look to kind of sell that printed effect or, practical effect. So zooming out, it looks a bit believable, right? But not crazy, but it is better for sure. We're going to select our layer again. We're going to add in, we're going to go to filters, go to noise, and add some noise. Probably add a bit around 25 maybe. 25 uniform monochromatic. Is it okay? Very subtle, but now you can see some noise on. You can maybe even add noise again by just going to filter, hitting add noise again. Right, so maybe pushing it a bit too much, but we'll keep it for our liking. But as you can see, it looks pretty decent now compared to our original version of it. There's one last step for this text I think adds a lot in terms of making it feel like it's really printed into those imperfections, and that is with our smudge tool right here. And what the smudge tool allows us to do, first make sure your settings are kind of similar to this, size 8, 14% hardness. Could be, again, to your liking. What it allows us to do though is take a layer, so for example our text layer, and just kind of smudge it in with the rest. And this obviously is something that a printer wouldn't actually do. It would do this if you were printing it, ink was wet, you smudge it or something like that, but which is possible. But what I like a lot is that when we're cycling between these words, right? So between the 3 variations of the words of test, 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 we want it to feel slightly different, right? Like the printing imperfection is made a little bit different because that little bit of difference or match in these words goes a long way. So what I like to do is take the smudge tool and kind of trace along the words, just playing along here and there. Sometimes being a little extreme, like doing something like that, but just kind of tracing along the words here and there, making sure one kind of remains pretty much untouched. But all 3 variations of each word are different. Right, and there already is a little bit of that with the ripple and with the noise, but it's adding something like this just makes it come alive a little bit more, right? So I'll go to the line and just kind of play with here and there. And again, you can get really fun with it. You can, add some pretty extreme stuff like that, pretty extreme vertical slashes, like do whatever you want, like just kind of mess around here. But for the sake of keeping with our other lyrics, I would do something like this, just kind of trace it a bit, play with the edges, just make them look different. But again, I would keep one to be kind of pretty untouched and clean as much as possible, just that way you don't, it doesn't feel too extreme. Well, 6, so now you have your first quote unquote scanned lyric sheet ready to go and ready to animate and cut up. So what we do from here is, like I said, just for the sake of keeping things clean and easing the workflow, I would fill this entire sheet with words I know I'm gonna have to use, something like that. But for now, this is good. So we're gonna save this whole image as a PNG. So let's go export as, and you're just gonna want to save it anywhere you want. You don't need transparency. Make sure it's on PNG so it's a good file. All the basic settings, and boom. So we're just gonna go and save this. So now we're going to Photoshop. Let's hop to Premiere. All right, so we are here in Premiere. And again, I'll reemphasize this again. You don't have to use Premiere for this part of the process. This part is actually really easy in terms of video editing software. So you could achieve this in CapCut, iMovie, After Effects. Obviously, probably even easier. DaVinci, whatever it is. This part, I think, is even more simple than Photoshop. But again, this is a workflow that I found. And if you have the paid pack, you already have a template project file for this, but I'm just going to try to make it very, very simple. But our goal here is to take that lyric sheet we just made, so with all those text on it, and cut it up and animate it so it's ready to be just a drag and drop asset that we can use however we want. You could do this within your actual project file. For example, if you're making a music video and you want to do it all, that's fine too. But I like to make my own project file just for this. That way I'm able to make these as actual assets that then I'll save to reuse later on. And that's how I recommend you do it. So we're in an empty project file, and we're just going to create a sequence first. So let's create a sequence, and for the sake of file size, and especially because these things are meant to be shrunk, these lyrics are meant to be shrunk in your final project, I go with a 1080p sequence. So default, I would just switch the time base 24 just so it's just clean and even. That way it's easy to animate, because we're doing these things we're going to be making these off 12 FPS. But you can make this a higher quality if you want, but to match the previous assets, it's a 1080p sequence. And we're actually going to make this 1080 by 1080, so it's a square. So that's easy. And let's change it back to 24. Boom. We can name this main sequence. So let's also, before I forget, let's bring in our lyric sheet. So whatever it is, import it. For me, it's right here. Okay, so we have our main sequence open and ready now. Let's take our lyric sheet, right? Drag it in, and at the start of the sequence, we're gonna hit right arrow on the keyboard twice. 1, 2. Hit C or go to your razor tool and cut it right there. Hit V to go back to your cursor and delete that. And now we have a two frames of this image. We're gonna right click it, make a nested sequence. What a nested sequence is, it essentially allows us to edit whatever is going to be inside of this image, right? It's without affecting the outer one. So let's just name it and drop the lyrics here. And what it's allow us to do is that you'll see it eventually, it just allows us to tweak whatever word we're selecting while keeping everything uniform. That way it's easier to export these things later on. But for now, let's make this nested sequence. Let's open it up. And now you'll see that we have this nested sequence. We have our 2 frames of our actual image here. What we're going to do is we're going to scale this up to your liking. You don't want too big, but you want enough where it's kind of like that, where it kind of feels like it can be cut out, dead center in the middle. And we're going to go to the top one, actually. So this is our first variation of the normal word of test, right? And we have it set here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our effect control panel here, and we'll go to our opacity and hit this pen button. We're just going to cut a rectangle, and you can hold down shift when you're selecting a new point to kind of make it a straight line. We're going to cut a rectangle around this, kind of imperfectly. And like as if we just cut off. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult getting a curved edge like that. We don't want these curved edge, so you can hold down Command, delete that point, and just redo it. And now we have a sharp one. But let's go also here to our settings. Let's turn down the mask feather to 0. We want it to be clean and sharp. And as you can see, we kind of just cut out now. We want to look like I said, kind of imperfect. We cut it out ourselves. You know, if using an X-Acto tool or something, it's kind of like straight line. Kind of imperfect, but now we have one version of a test. But now our step is we want to cycle through the other two variations of this to kind of bring it to life, right? So we're going to select our image, hit Command C, and hit Command V next to it, and we're going to copy it, right? So now we have set and copy. And what I like to do is I'd like to drag this up, and what you're going to do is you're going to go to your mask on this new layer. Let's drag it up first, and holding down Shift, we're just going to drag this down, straight down, until we find our second word of test. Drag this up. What I like to do here too is take this bottom layer, extend it out, and now we could compare this one with that one to make sure they're kind of on the same level. What we want to make sure though is that this outline isn't the same, right? So we don't want to go crazy with them. I'm using Option here to zoom in and scroll. I'm going to scroll over to zoom in. We don't want to go crazy with this in terms of changing too much. We just want to very lightly just adjust the corners like we cut it ourselves. You know, it's imperfect, so it's different. It's not exact. It's very lightly. And if we take the other one and we cycle it on and off, you can see how the text itself, you know, is different, right? And it's not perfectly in line. That's okay. We can adjust it later if it's too much. But you see the noise and especially the smudge that we added is different. That's gonna help bring it to life. But now we have two versions of this test. Now we're gonna make a third one. So selecting the second layer again, we're just gonna copy Command C and Command V to create a new copy. And you can probably guess that we're just gonna go up, and then we're just gonna hold down Shift, just go down until we find the next test thing. And again, this is why I'm saying, like, it doesn't have to be exactly center, but doing it so actually helps a lot. Doing that. Let's extend this out to make sure we're over the same point. And boom. Let's adjust these a bit. It's different. And now we have 3 of these text lyrics. And if we go back to our main sequence, this is where the real magic happens. Right, so we have our sequence. Let's extend it out all the way now, so it includes the new layers that we added, you know, the new runtime. And we're going to take this Command C, go to the end of it, and Command V 5 times for a total of 6 of these nested sequences, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have 6 total. Go to your start of your sequence, hit I. Go to the end of your sequence or end of your files, hit O. And let's close this. Drag it to the end. And now hit loop playback, which will be here. Hit the plus button. You can add it from here if you don't have it already. Turn it on. And hit spacebar. You'd see it cycling through, right? So what's cool about this though is now when we try to make more lyrics, right? Instead of editing this main sequence and having to copy back and forth, like, we can just go into our nested sequence and just edit the actual text here, you know, whatever this word is, and it'll update here. And now we have this loopable, perfectly ready, decent 1-second clip to export out and use as an asset. And like I said, I could use a higher quality 1080, but as a mix of keeping file size and just for ease of use of it, I've kept it like this way, and it's only 1 second, so you can choose to repeat it at your own liking within your actual edit, but I have a very easy and draggable asset. Okay, so now you have your first asset ready to export and use. So we're gonna go to our main sequence, make sure we're in the main sequence, go to export. And I already have a preset made for this, but ignore what it says here. I'm just gonna show you how to make it yourself. We're gonna go to format, go to QuickTime, under video codec, turn to ProS 444. That's very important. That's ProS 444. And we're going to go down. Make sure you're on 24, which is all the same as it should be in the sequence. We actually turn off audio because we don't need audio. And in fact, it makes it easier when you're dragging in Premiere. So turn off audio. But in this basic video settings, hit more. Go down here to depth, and we're going to change it to 16 BPC plus alpha. And alpha is very important. You could do 8 with alpha, but it has to be alpha. Alpha will make our background transparent. So instead of a black background, this is ready just to drop this text in. So it's very important that it's like that, right? Maximum quality, maximum depth, all that stuff. And doing it at ProRes will give us this uncompressed, easily repeatable max res file, which is really important. Because like I said, again, we're only in a 1080p sequence, and this is meant to be shrunk though. But keeping it as ProRes, even though it's a bigger file, it's only 1 second. It's very, very small. It's worth it. It's great. So I'll keep them as ProRes. But you can go in, you can add, all this as a preset, make it your own. I call my mixed media lyrics. It's whatever. And then change your name, location, whatever you want, and hit export. So it's really easy. But if you want to make more though, I will show you that. So going back to our drop the lyrics here, that's a sequence. We would just go into our mask and just holding shift again to keep it so it's locked like at a certain level. We're just going to drag to the right and select a different word. And because of your different words, you don't have to worry too much about fixing the sides or the outline of it. Because different words, different lengths, you might get lucky, like now, for example, and it's a perfect length for that. We don't need to change anything, but sometimes you might need to make it smaller or whatnot. But then you rinse and repeat the same process, and you don't need to keep copy and pasting like I did before. You could just keep referring to this new file you've made, which actually makes it easier, because then, like I said, if you get lucky with the edges of everything, you don't need to change these edges anymore. Like you could just keep them as the same because they already were different. They're not going to match. So like I said, we'll just do one more of this. We just go to the side. Now we have test 2. If we go back to our main sequence, now test 2 is looping. Like I said, there's a decent amount of movement here in this one. So you might want to go in there and actually try to make it as even as possible in terms of placement. So it's a little bit more to the left. A little bit better, but you see, like a little moving it slightly changes the law in terms of the feeling of it. But there's a lot you can do here, and you should probably fix this one, for example. But you get the point. You rinse and repeat that process. Is how you make more, and you can just keep doing it this way until you have a new piece of paper and you to add in that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much it. It's really easy. All right, so you made your first lyric asset. Congratulations! And now you know the entire process of how to make your own lyrics. And add in, so whether you have the pack or not, or the paid pack or not, you can add in more lyrics, or if you need more lyrics, now you can add in stuff. But how do you use the pack? I just want to really quickly show you a very easy demonstration. I think it's pretty straightforward, but a very simple demonstration to show you how to use this pack, and some few tips and tricks I found to kind of elevate the realism of it. So here I have an edit of a Yeet song. Unfortunately, I can't play the song for copyright reasons, but you see that I just used the lyrics to kind of bring to life this edit. And yeah, playing with different all sorts of stuff. It's pretty straightforward. You can see this kind of stuff. But how did I do this? So first, you want to drag in all your lyrics. So there's a few different ways to do that. Mine look a bit different than yours, because mine are these are the actual folder I was using when I was actively making these assets. But it's straightforward. It's a folder of all these different assets that are ready to drop in however you like, right? There's a few things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to drag it in. What I would normally do is I would find an edit, right? And I understand that this part of the song, I want the lyrics. So I would first bring in an asset, right? So for example, the word better. And let's say I know that it has to come in at this point, but has to end or last until here of the edit, right? Until everything comes in. Obviously, I can't drag this in. We only made the lyric last so long, right? For many reasons, but what I do here is the first, I'll hold down Option to duplicate this. And you just want to duplicate it, making sure you're hitting the end of the file, not overlapping it, just continuing it. Make sure you overlap to your moment. Hit Select all 3, hit Nest, and then just rename it. And now we have a new asset that lasts the length of it, of what we need, right? So from here, there's a few things you can do. If you have the paid pack, there should already actually be a preset folder in here, which you can also go in here and import presets if you don't have it, called Mixed Media Lyric Base. And what this does is just a few things. So let's throw it on to show you what it does. First, it adds a shadow, right? A little drop shadow, which you can add yourself really easily. It's pretty sharp, and it just kind of makes it feel like it's placed on top of the video. Which, for example of this, I don't know if you could tell, but I have some textures already on. These are free textures that actually are available as part of a holiday pack, but gives it a paper look. So it makes it feel like it's a collage, right? And this stacks on top of that to kind of make it look like it's like a piece of paper that was laid on top of the collage, right? It's a little minor effect. But the second thing is, has a transform thing here, which just adds a little movement at the beginning, so it starts off bigger and shrinks down. Literally just increasing the scale and minimizing it so it looks like it was placed down. And that's just a little add-on I made to kind of make it feel like I said, that these lyrics are being placed as they're, appearing here and there. Just a small touch. I didn't burn either of these effects into the actual assets. That way, it was flexibility, right? But if you don't have the preset pack, you can just make the same thing. For example, I just wanted to transform, had to be bigger, dead center for 2 frames or whatever, and then it just shrinks. Pretty straightforward, very easy. You can make them, and if you know how to make a preset in Premiere, you can take whatever effect you have or multiple effects, holding down Shift, and you right click and do Save Preset, and that'll add to your presets. You can drag and drop it to your liking. So cool, that's an easy thing. Another thing you can do, I might have showed this already, is invert. So say you have an example. I really want to emphasize the word stay here on this part, right? So actually, I'm choosing a different part because that's in a different sequence. Let's say I want to emphasize the word way, right? So using a very simple invert filter, which every editing software should have, and if not, it's as simple as just flipping the color of an image, whatever that may look like in your edit, in your software. But as you can see, it just flips it so the paper is black and the text is white. And as you can see, also this has a drop shadow on it, which creates a white outline. So if you don't want that, you can just turn that off, or you can actually flip it, the order of it. So now the shadow is still black and whatnot. It doesn't get affected by the invert. But the white's also kind of cool. And of course, you can play with the shadow to make it look different and whatnot. But it's just a small little thing you can do. And I'm sure there's a lot of different ways you could change the color of these lyrics as well, while keeping that same style. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And I would just go in and drag the lyrics, to your liking, play with sizing. I don't recommend punching them, scaling them up too much, although you could do that. But you will lose some quality in that. But the real way I would say to make it look extra realistic is doing something like this, where you layer more mixed media textures at 12 FPS on top of it, like I do here. Which again, these are free textures you can download as part of a holiday pack on our store. Well, there you go, guys. You just made your first mixed media lyric asset. You should be proud of yourself. Like I said, I don't think it's too hard. It's just kind of time consuming. But once you get the flow of it, you go by pretty fast. I mean, I was cranking out like so many of these during, each day. Once I got to the flow of it, there's probably some better flows or workflows you incorporate to make this easier. If you guys have any suggestions, please leave them below. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys learned something. If you guys watched this far, thank you. Hope you guys learned something. If you guys have the pack, give me some feedback on what you guys think about it. I don't love the idea of charging for a pack. However, I think it's a pretty fair deal. It just saves you a time. I think it's 500 assets for that. Hopefully you can see that. I think a few bucks is worth a cup of coffee. Sports is a lot here at Dumb Days, just to make more videos like this and more tools, and just more stuff for you guys in general. But yeah, leave any suggestions of what else you would like to see. I think we are going to make a new mixed media tutorial kind of in the next few months, just kind of showing some more advanced techniques, and also just a better workflow that I found. You guys are still watching the video a lot, so yeah, if you guys have anything else, just let me know. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope you guys learned something. Don't forget, it's better to be dumb, dare to be dumb. Peace.